And now, without further delay, let's get started with today's event, sponsored by IBM and hosted by American Banker. I would now like to turn things over to your moderator, Mike Sisk.
Great. Thank you so much, Erin. And I would like to welcome the audience once again. We are grateful that you've chosen to share some of your day with us. We know your time is valuable, and for the next 60 minutes or so, we will make every effort to make every minute count. Once again, our topic today is it your analytics or your clients who alert you to a fraud problem? And my name is Michael Sisk. I will be your moderator today. I've been a New York-based journalist for 20 years now. I'm a contributing editor at American Banker, and I've covered business and financial markets for about 20 years. My articles have also appeared in Barron's, Crain's New York Business, Inc., Institutional Investor, Strategy in Business, and Worth. And we have two excellent speakers with us today. And I'm having a little trouble advancing my slides. Erin, could you please advance the slides? Thank you so much. The first is David Dixon. He is the global leader of IBM Counter-Fraud Management. David is an established expert in global anti-fraud, anti-money laundering, and anti-terrorism programs for financial institutions. David has an extensive number of publications in the fraud, AML, and information security arena. A frequent speaker at international conferences, he led the development and delivery of industry-leading financial crime solutions for Norcom Technologies, a leading global technology provider, and continued with BAE Systems Dedica after they acquired Norcom. Both Norcom and Dedica have extensive insurance fraud practices with leading clients around the world. And we are very, very pleased to have David with us today. And joining David is Wilson Davis. He is executive consultant, IBM Strategy and Analytics. Wilson is an experienced technology executive and consultant who specializes in financial and operational data analytics, counter-fraud and anti-money laundering, straight-through processing, IT department transformations, and game-changing improvements in business processes and application systems for the financial services industry. Wilson has 10 years' experience as a Fortune 500 IT executive, plus 15 years as a partner-level consultant. And we are very delighted to have Wilson with us here today as well. And just before we jump into the real meat of the program, I wanted to just do a few quick housekeeping items, something that Erin did mention at the top. We do have time at the end for 10 or 15 minutes or so of Q&A. You do not have to wait until the end to put your questions into the queue. You can put those questions in as they occur to you throughout the hour. We encourage you to do that. And if for some reason we run out of time and don't get your question, which sometimes happens when we have a lot of great content, we will follow up. So you will hear from us afterwards. So fear not, your voice will be heard. Ask anything you would like. Also, we've got a couple of polls today, and I always encourage 100% participation whenever possible. We do share the results live with everyone here today, and it's kind of a nice way to level set and sort of see where other folks stand on the issue that we've all come together to discuss. So if you can participate, that would be outstanding. And I think that will bring me to the end of my little introductory spiel here. Let me turn things over to David. David, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. And just briefly, I'm going to jump to the agenda. We wanted to cover three sets of things with you today. And Erin, I'm also unable to advance the slides. Hang on.
I just did.
Okay, thank you. So the three areas we want to cover are, first of all, we want to talk a little bit about some of the results of a recent study that Wilson and I co-authored. And Wilson will explain a lot more about it, where we talk about the nature of the fraud problem and the challenges that financial institutions are experiencing with today's operations. As a result of the study, we were able to make some very clear points of differentiation between what the leaders in the area are doing and what others are doing. And so we want to share with you what those leading practices are and some of the insights that we gained as a result of that. And then thirdly, we want to talk a little bit about the evolution to cognitive computing and how it's applicable in the fight against fraud. So those are the three distinct areas. We're going to be moving right along, but again, fire questions at us. There's a lot more material than what we're going to be able to present and discuss with you today, but I think you'll enjoy it. Let me turn it over to Wilson to talk about a little bit more about the study and some of our findings. Wilson?
Thanks, David, and it's a pleasure to be with you all. We found a lot in this study, and there was a huge, well, we'll get into this first. The Winning the Face-Off of Fraud study was conducted during the third quarter of last year, and we included 500 banking executives from around the world and conducted several one-on-one interviews. The survey itself was conducted electronically, but we selected, we restricted it to the C-level, or at least the person who had enterprise responsibility over fraud operations. So 70% of that of those 500 respondents were at the C-level. 18% were at the SVP level as head of fraud operations, and we had 11% who designated themselves with other titles than that. We did span the globe. We went into all of the major banking geographic regions, and we were off to the right-hand side is a little bit of a distribution among the types of executives we studied. If we go on to the next slide, we found quite a few broad differences in how institutions view their fraud effectiveness. Indeed, control over fraud was viewed as a competitive differentiator by 14% of those who participated, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But importantly here, the industry has an issue. 43% believe they have an issue in control over fraud. And technology can help. But 78% of those that responded indicate that they had trouble using the technology effectively. You'll see that 22% are in that sweet spot of having adequate fraud technology and the ability to be able to use it. But truly 78% were having some difficulty. So it's the key here, it's not just the systems or the applications, it's how they're being used effectively. We go on to the next slide. There's a polling question we'd like to ask you, and we'll take the results of that. Mike, would you like to kind of explain what we're doing here?
Yes, happy to do that. And as promised, this is the first of our two poll questions of the day. And what I'll do is I'll read the question. I'll read through the answers as there's 6 or 7 here, and hopefully by the time I've gotten through all that, everyone will have had a chance to absorb and make their selection. So what is the top factor contributing to inefficiencies in your fraud investigation unit? Is it we don't have enough resources with the right skill sets? We don't have the right technology? Our processes and technology are too complex? Or we don't have enough support from the top of the company? Or we don't have enough funding for the right staff or technology? Or there are not other factors, there are other factors not listed here, or nothing, we've got what we need. So again, what is the top factor, so just choose one, contributing to inefficiencies in your fraud investigation unit? And probably with all of that talking, you've had enough time to make a selection, so I will go ahead and share the results now. And here we go. So good. So actually pretty clearly, 40.6% of you said we don't have the right technology, and that's clearly the answer that led the way here. So let me turn things over to Wilson. How do those results look to you?
So those results look pretty close to what we've learned from the market during both our survey and the interviews we conducted. Clearly here, as you see, the salient issue is they don't have the right technology. Some of them do, but many of them are a little bit behind in the technology, particularly when they consider the newly emerging technologies. And David and I will get into that a little bit later about what's available today that's come out of the lab in and actually has gone into effective production over the last 5 years. Also, we did find in direct interviews, particularly as well as a survey, there was quite a bit of complaint about process and technology being too complex, or the inability or the difficulties in using that. And then I'll advance to the next slide here and show you the results of our survey. And we'll see here that most financial institutions that there's a problem with operations being too costly, and that was one of the answers that we had before. 64% indicated the high cost of fraud operations. Now, this is not just the technology itself, but it's the cost of running an investigative unit. It's the cost of dealing with maintenance of the system, and it's also the cost of fraud in terms of the direct losses. Also, 42% out there indicate that they need an operational overhaul, and that includes operations and technology. You'll note that the second and third bars, which add up to about 61%, oh, that's the wrong slide, so I'm going to advance to the next slide. And most institutions haven't even started a fraud program yet. I think I skipped over too many slides, so I'm going to back up a little bit, if you'll excuse me. 31. Okay.
Yeah,
sorry, I got lost a little bit.
Go to 13.
Sorry, David. Go ahead. Yep. Okay, I'll go to 13.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh.
Okay, so fraud charge-offs alone have had a significant impact on the bottom line. You'll see some key differentiators here, and there's a big divide in the bottom line results. There appears to be a 10 basis point difference between the top and the bottom performers as a percentage of revenue. And this is pretty significant in terms of those differentiators. If you go to the next slide, there's another polling question here. And Mike, I'll turn it back over to you. I'm sorry, I think I skipped over a few slides, but we'll keep the momentum going here.
Okay, thanks, Wilson. Yes, and so we've got the second polling question here, and we'll handle it just the way I did before. I'll just read through it all. In this case, however, if you would please select the top three that apply, not just your top answer. So what elements are critical to strengthening your fraud prevention team? We need better people to perform analysis. We need to train our people to use the current technology. We need bigger budgets and more resources. We need better technology. Or we need to augment our technology to move to real time. We need to be more agile, or we need better fraud intelligence. So there we have, again, about seven selections there. Please pick the top three of those. Again, what elements are critical to strengthening your fraud prevention team? I'll give everyone just another couple of moments, and then we'll be off to the races with the rest of the program here. That's probably enough time, so let me go ahead and share. And here we go. So the need for better technology, the need to augment technology to move to real time, and looks like we need better fraud intelligence. So the top three vote getters in this grouping. Interesting. Thank you all for participating, and let me turn things back over to Wilson, see if that kind of jives with what you expected to see.
And it does, Mike. Thank you very much. Better fraud intelligence will show a little bit later on. David will show a little bit later on, which is the second largest one here, can be a function of that technology and the effective usage of it as well. So this all kind of supports and is in very much line with the surveys that we conducted. I'm going to advance to the next slide, which turns out to be another section header. And what we'll do here is talk about how institutions, what capabilities they're using to be more effective at fighting financial crimes. Some of the elements, all these items that are shown right here, contribute to the ability to stop or interdict fraud pretty much in real time. So one of the key differentiators that we found in our survey and in our interviews clearly was the ability to stop the crime before the money moves. That is a key factor for most of these guys. That's actually brought us to our title for the survey, for the seminar today. Are your clients telling you this, which is way after the fact? Or do you have the ability to notice a crime about to be perpetrated, the transaction's gone in, and we've detected it soon enough before the money gets moved? And all these capabilities here contribute to that. Real-time detection, broader information set, robust analytics set, really, really good model hygiene, and which really represents a multifaceted, very well integrated solution set. And we can get into that a little bit later as well. I'll go to the next slide.
And again, what we're presenting here is these are the practices of the people who were getting for the most part, we're getting the extremely good results, and we're trying to demonstrate what are the critical elements that led to that nearly 300% improvement in terms of actual fraud losses.
Yeah. Thanks, David. Those capabilities were some of the attributes, or many of the attributes that those folks that consider their fraud capability as a competitive differentiator, actually attracting clients to them and gaining market share, had those capabilities in play. This slide here about external data sources, while most institutions rely on their own internal data, some of the new technologies and methods that are out there related to big data, which includes using external data, public data, and broad information sets, are now being emerging and being utilized by the innovative companies, and that's indicated here. Still, there's an opportunity here for further growth. On the next slide, we're going to talk about the effective counter fraud measures that need to improve analytics and some of the key capabilities they use here. In terms of the largest one here, the most salient, here's a wish list of the 5 fraud fighting capabilities. At the top is link analysis, or the ability to tie in information across related cases. A lot of institutions have siloed fraud operations with different people, different technologies, different methods across the various divisions in a financial institution. And if they do that, it makes link analysis a whole lot harder to do. It makes it hard to knit all that information together. In the next slide, the reaction times. Agility is an issue. It's been repeated elsewhere in other studies that organized crime accounts for 80% of the fraud perpetrated today. The bad guys are very fast, and they change methods frequently. It's difficult to keep up when most institutions take at least 2 months between the time they discover a new fraud crime pattern and to put the controls in place to start stopping it. And as you see the arrows here, what institutions are trying to do is shorten that cycle time. A lot of them out there, some of the worst performers, are taking more than 6 months to find out when the first fraud occurred. And the better performers are ones that actually only take about a week or 1 to 3 weeks for that to happen. Then the next piece of work that needs to be done is to adjust the transaction scoring engines or the detection methods to stop the fraud pattern from happening. And sometimes that takes several weeks or months to get the changes in place to the systems to stop that money from moving.
So that's a vulnerability window that you're describing.
Yes. Yep. That's that 2 month window plus that is very difficult. And during that period of time, fraud persists. So the losses continue over that period of time until the controls get in place to stop that particular pattern. By that time, particularly the organized criminals who don't have to watch budgets for new technologies and those types of things, they've already instituted a new pattern, and they've moved on to the next scheme. So it's very difficult for institutions to keep up these days. So again, this is kind of a repeat of a slide we had before. 78% of those institutions are having trouble using the technology. So if they can, and in the polling results we had before, a lot of folks are indicating that they need better technology. So those two things combined, technology is clearly an issue that improvements can be made, but I would also caution very strongly that the usage of that technology, whatever you have today, can most certainly and probably be used a whole lot better with a little bit more intelligence around things like model management, how to intuitively detect fraud, how do we put operational controls in place, how do we teach our own staff how to better use that technology and be a little bit more agile themselves in the usage of it. So most financial institutions right now are trying to move this arrow off to the right now, where 16%, only 16% right now are detecting fraud as it's being attempted. And the ones on the right-hand side, it's sad to say, difficult to understand why 18% are actually unable to determine fraud at all. And again, 31% rely on their customers to alert them to a fraud pattern happening. So what do we do about executing a good fraud transformation program? How do we get this thing going, and what do we do? A lot of institutions are great at transaction processing and what they call regular business as usual, but in terms of change management, they've got a little bit more difficulty. So fraud transformation programs are not easy to do. They take a little while, and they can be expensive, but some of the techniques that we can employ to make those transformation programs more effective, go faster, and get implemented a whole lot earlier so that we can begin to enjoy some of the benefits of these technologies and operational changes, are first to understand the time and cost it's going to take and do a very, very good estimate, understand what it's going to take to get it done and inform executive management so that they can be prepared for what's going to take place. Engage multidisciplined expertise, not just people that are experts in fraud, not just people that are experts in technology, but excellent project managers, excellent people who are good at analytics. Some people employ data scientists. Other ones employ experts in fraud operations and change management, and those are the disciplines that are required. They pick the most relevant cases, so it's not I need one of everything, and I need all these capabilities wrapped up into one. For most institutions, that's very difficult to do and very difficult to manage. But if you can select what capabilities are the most salient for your institution, what capabilities are the ones that you're going to benefit most from, and prioritize those and implement those in good sequence, and some in parallel, some in good sequence by priority, that's a good way to execute the project, and we've been told that from our financial institutions as well. And not only include a software solution, for example, that's going to be, if I buy this, it's going to take me to the promised land. Not quite the case. There's also a multidisciplinary approach to this, including not only the technology, but the process, the governance, the organization, how you're going to resolve problems, how you're going to execute. All of those things count as well. And finally, the new technologies they're just emerging from the lab, just in the last 5 years, really, in terms of big data, in terms of very, very robust analytics, being able to analyze large quantities of data, much of it unstructured. The speed of processing now is an order of magnitude greater than it was 5 or 6 years ago. All of that together are the foundations for the newly emerging cognitive computing that are coming out today. And David's going to get into that a little bit, but if you've got these tools and these new technologies, that's the foundation for being able to have a very agile, very rapidly adapting system that can detect fraud in real time and significantly lower cost of operation. And with that, I'll turn it over to David to take the next piece of it. David Dixon, would you please take it away? Thank you. David, you might be on mute.
And I do my best work on mute. Thanks, Wilson. I want to share a few thoughts with you about these concepts of cognitive, as well as an application example that's coming up, and talk a little bit about how IBM is thinking about this and how we're applying it in the counter fraud and financial crime space. So first of all, you see the ads, you read the magazine. So what's cognitive? It's a description of a technology and analytics approach that's moving us from, and this little graphic is just designed to show a generational flow from the descriptive world, where we discovered through data and through reports and analysis things that were going on. In the counter fraud world, this was the use of spreadsheets and analysts effectively shuffling spreadsheets in order to identify fraudulent issues and act on them. Then we moved up to a predictive world, where we used more sophisticated analytics, more sophisticated models in order to define what looked like suspicious behaviors, in order to predict fraudulent behavior, and in order to suggest actions, to a cognitive world where we're going now, where we understand where the technology actually is capable of reasoning and learning. With luck, we have enthusiastic technology here. Very good. So I'll draw out a few things. So again, now this is moving from that general model to talking a little bit about some of the key things that we're seeing it. So first of all, in the engage column, I'll call out that one of the key factors that's encouraging the adoption of cognitive approaches in the financial crime and fraud world is that these technologies can act as a tireless agent. They don't need lunch breaks. They don't go home after 8 or 8.5 hours on the floor, and also they act in a consistent way. They don't drop away. They don't vary because they're having a bad day in terms of how they actually act. A second component I wanted to draw out is that they work on context and evidence-based reasoning. They're understanding the entities. In the slide we talk about consumers, but it can also apply to commercial entities as well. And they enrich the interactions with additional data. So they are drawing in more of the big data world in order to engage more completely around the situation. Secondly, they are in the discover column. They find insights and connections, right? They capture the expertise of top performers, and they accelerate the development of expertise in others. So by using a cognitive system that's capable of learning and working with a top performing investigator or analyst, the system will come to understand how that analyst approaches the problems, and then can be used to prompt other people who are not at the same skill level to adopt the very professional approaches of the best performers. So it visualizes possibilities and it validates theories like experts. So it's enhancing the cognitive processes. So for a professional, it actually helps elevate their game, and for less experienced individuals, it allows them to operate on a professional level. And then in the last column, we move over into the decision making, where we're seeing evidence-based recommendations. So the quality and consistency of the decision making across the organization is elevated by these kinds of approaches. And these learning systems continue to evolve. So the accuracy increases over time, and the accuracy also increases when you introduce new data elements. So often data is a key to this, but even though we want all of the data that we can think of relative to a problem, we often have difficulty getting a hold of that data. So these learning systems are capable of starting with a less than optimal data set, and then as more data becomes available, they continue to enhance and sharpen their results. Let me now evolve that one more level. So again, this is another view of how we're trying to deliver greater and stronger insights into behaviors and decisions. And we're moving from addressing with our predictive analytics world predefined problems to being able to deal with ambiguous problems and situations, being able to tolerate a margin of error. It doesn't have to be a definitive answer. The learning systems, cognitive systems can provide insight, right, and have tolerance for that. And it doesn't have to have everything exactly defined in order to move forward. And many of the cognitive systems are capable of dealing with natural language, actually interacting with investigators and analysts as they go forward. So this is moving again from predictive analytic systems to taking into account trade-offs or consequences associated with actions that we see in the approach of using cognitive analytics. So let's jump to an example of where it has applicability. And specifically, I want to talk about the payment ecosystem and, in particular, the move to the cashless payment ecosystem. So we're seeing industry-wide a move to faster payments, more online payments, more mobile payments. The U.S. is now fully engaged with rolling out the EMV chip and PIN world. So just as we've seen in other geographies, we're going to see a dramatic shift in the fraud attacks into the card-not-present world and the online world. As a result of it, the organized criminals don't back off. So we're going to have new challenges. And as each of the new modalities are introduced, and everything tells us that more and more fintech is coming, more and more payments are coming, and all of those introduce new vulnerabilities, new risks, new areas of potential cross-exploitation into the environment. And in addition to the risks that are exposed as a result of the new approaches, the nature of the attacks is shifting and the time frame is shortening. So in the presentation of the study results, Wilson was pointing out that we've had already seen, and you in your responses, I think it was over 48% of you responded that you saw a need to move to direct intervention in real-time fraud decision-making. And that's exactly the situation that we're seeing as an absolute necessity as we move into all of these new payment infrastructures. So the current defenses are, frankly, not in a position, for the most part, to directly deal with the situations. A lot of the legacy solutions are black box solutions where the vendor has to intervene in order to change the analytics and code and put in place new scenarios. A lot of them have rigid data structures and great difficulty in terms of adding the additional data points and reaching out to big data sources to be able to reduce the risk across it. So we're getting into a more dangerous world, and I think it's fair to say that the U.S., with the acceleration of faster payments and the technological revolution that's going on, is probably right on the front line with the elevation of fraud risk that we expect to see over the next 3 to 5 years. So let me talk a little bit about how IBM thinks about this and the kinds of capabilities that we're pioneering, some of which you would have heard about because we don't make any secret about advertising it. But we have definitely gone after cognitive computing, and in particular, one of our first pieces is to directly go after payment fraud exposures. But I'm going to talk through some of the critical characteristics that you should be thinking about when you're thinking about how do I move to a technology to leapfrog me into a more competitive position. How do I move into a leading practice? And here are some of the things that I think you want to look for. So the first part is, if you're going to step into a world where you want to embrace mobile payments, online payments, faster payments, you want to be seen as a leader in the provision of services to your clients, both individual and commercial entities, you're going to want to have exceptionally high performance. And I'm going to call out, first of all, the center bullet under the high performance one, ultra-high real-time performance. If you're moving into that world and want to play in that world, you've got to be able to deal with thousands of transactions per second. You have to have latencies that are a few milliseconds. The communications lags that the new approaches are introducing into the payment stream are squeezing what we're already seeing as remarkably short decisioning windows for these kinds of capabilities. So remember, you have to deal with, if you think about a credit card example and you're standing in front of the machine at the merchant, that transaction has to go through in seconds. You can't be standing around for 25 or 30 seconds waiting for the transaction to clear. It's got to happen fast. And your request for authorization has to go through the authorization windows and decisioning engines, as well as through multiple steps in the process in order to get it cleared. And if you're going to run real-time fraud analytics, or if it's a wire transfer scenario, if you're going to apply real-time financial crime, anti-money laundering, sanction screening to it, you're going to have to be firing in milliseconds, literally. The second part, the third bullet on the green one on the left side, is it's got to be bulletproof. It's just got to be bulletproof. You as a financial institution and a provider of services can't afford to have your payment systems not available to your clients. And your clients can't afford to do business with you unless they can rely on your payment systems being up and fully operational. And the top point on that side is you should have ultra-low false positives. If you're evaluating these kinds of technologies, look for false positives. And that false positives speaks to the expense. And you saw in the study results that Wilson referred to that the whole process is just too expensive. And the two big drivers of expense are, one, the actual fraud losses themselves, since a fraud loss dollar is a profit dollar that's lost. It's not just a cost dollar, it's actually a profit dollar. If you don't lose it, you get to report it as profit. And two, the cost of processing false positives, right, which in the fraud world a false positive is actually a negative customer experience, and you don't get to earn the interchange on the declined transaction. So you lost money on it, and you annoyed your client. Right? So, and that in the AML world, a false positive is just a straight out-and-out cost element for you. So that's critically important. In the cognitive computing piece, again, I'm going to start with the middle one, the white box approach. So what we're talking about directly talks to and addresses the issues about how long it takes from the time that your intelligence people and your fraud experts tell you that there's a new modality of attack going on to the time that you are able to get changes made to your detection capabilities. And so in white box models, you, the bank, know exactly what the models are, and you can change the models. In a good cognitive system, the system will be suggesting model and rule changes to you, threshold changes to you on an ongoing basis, will be prompting your people because it will observe changes in attack patterns and point out to your controlling people that they should be taking action. So this very much moves you into a different place. And that's the bottom point, the virtual analyst. It's the next generation of machine learning fraud analytics. So it's automatically generating potential models, automatically generating potential rules, and comparing them with what's in existence to you and suggesting that you're moving forward. And what that means is, if your bank is struggling because good data scientists are really hard to get a hold of, and they're also amazingly expensive as a result of that, so you might want to have 10 or 20 or 50 in your bank in order to maintain your model capabilities and diligence, but you can't afford it, or you just literally can't get those people, period. By having this allows you to, a virtual analyst, under the direction of some highly qualified professionals, will be suggesting and enabling your intermediate professionals to operate as if they were top-tier professionals, and will help your top-tier professionals continue to evolve and move to a newer layer. So look for those kinds of characteristics, right? And again, that whole approach leads to that democratization of modeling. And don't forget to vote if you're in a primary state today. White box models, so that customers, again, aren't dependent on the vendor. Make sure that in the new world you're in charge. On the fraud side, it's important because, again, speed is what results in higher quality programs. Your ability to move quickly and both design and implement new capabilities is what's vitally important to your success in terms of doing it. And in the AML and financial crime world, it's important because the regulators demand that you be able to explain to them how you're effectively driving governance. And then on the last column, because this is about payments specifically, you need to make sure that a solution is payments industry ready, right? Ready to actually meet the industry data security standards, actually is certified, is going to actually give you little or no downtime. 99.999% reliability is actually the standard you should be looking for. And hopefully that whenever you're moving into a direction or you're expanding the capability to a new business that you're opening up or a new area that you want to cover in your bank, that you have a relatively short installation cycle. A characteristic of these learning systems, remember when I was talking about how you didn't have to have all the data elements perfected before you could start to move and implement the system? A characteristic of cognitive systems and learning systems is that you can start that way, which means you can start fast. And starting fast means shorter time to value and a ramp-up cycle for value, and the ability to also continue to improve and evolve as your business and your access to big data improves and evolves. So that was a lot of words fired at you in a relatively short time frame, and I apologize for that. But I did want to share some of the excitement that we have about both what we've seen in terms of the characteristics of industry leaders and the kinds of quality of results in terms of losses and costs that they get compared to how the majority of institutions in the space do. And I also wanted to share the excitement about how we're driving now and seeing a new generation of solutions available using what the industry is talking about as cognitive approaches in order to actually deliver those kinds of results and to future-proof institutions for the challenges that they're going to be facing as we move through this new world. So we're at the point of, and I think we have 10 minutes left to deal with some questions. I flipped up a next steps page here for you that gives you how you can actually get the summary of the study. Obviously, we didn't present as much as is available in this. And also how, if you want to continue these conversations, these are some of the near-term events where we will have experts familiar with the study, familiar with the technologies, who are willing to have discussions, and please feel free to reach out. Michael, do you want to host questions?
Yeah, I would love to do that, actually, David. Thank you. And as you said, we do have about 10 minutes left in the hour to handle a few questions here. So I see some great questions in the queue, and if anybody in the audience has got something on their mind, now would be the time to post it up for us to take a look at. So let me kick things off. The first question I have here, I'm going to read it to you guys. Now, there might be a word missing here. I'm not sure. Is this analytical tool or detection system or score? Is that a question that makes sense to you?
So okay, so let me try the question. So if you're talking about what IBM is working on, the new capabilities, so this is, so we actually have some solution capabilities. So it's actually a solution, and it is a new form of analytics that we're talking about when we're talking about cognitive solutions. It's a new kind of analytics, and to complete the solution, we also include some of the predictive and behavioral analytics as well as the cognitive analytics in order to produce the optimal results. Hoping that addresses that question.
Great, thank you. Thank you. All right, next question here. On page 27, is page 27 on payment fraud or transaction fraud or both?
Okay, page.
And if you want to share that page, you can as well by clicking on it if you care to.
Okay, this is the page that I have as 27. Oh, I just skipped it, sorry. I got too excited. I gave an example of payments, right, which was really on page, moving to the payments industry, really on page 28 and 29. I talked about payments per se to try and bring it into the real world, and also because I think payments are probably the most critical area facing the North American financial institutions right now. The kinds of things in terms of cognitive computing on 27 and even some of the more generic principles on 26 are equally applicable to transaction screening. So the core solution infrastructure will vary slightly from one to the other. The nature of the analytic engines and approaches will be consistent, i.e. the engines, but the actual types of models, rules, decisioning pieces will vary according to the specific nature of the line of business being addressed, i.e. what I mean by that is, so wire fraud and credit card fraud are different in terms of the nature of the use cases and the applicable thresholds and decisioning points and the nature of the profiles of the entities that you would use to address them. But equally applicable to transactions across multiple lines of business as well as specific to payments.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, David. All right. Next question here. Let's see, I'll share this one with you. Can you elaborate on how institutions think they have a competitive differentiator with their change to fraud operations?
That's a hard question. Ask Wilson.
Wilson, you're up. I think you're on mute, Wilson.
Wilson? Okay, try the question again and I'll answer it. Sorry.
That's okay. So can you elaborate on how institutions think they have a competitive differentiator with their change to fraud operations?
Sorry, guys. The phone fell off. But I can answer this question in terms of how institutions view their competitive differentiation. And we got a lot of the information about that when we directly interviewed some of the leading institutions around the world. And there are a couple factors. First one, obviously, was the real-time detection. We talked about that before a little bit in the conversation. But also, it's some of the things that they're doing. Number one, they're continuously investing in improving their operation, not only from a capability enhancement standpoint, but from a cost reduction standpoint. They're actually transforming themselves, and with improved analytics, if you've got better false positive results, in other words, that's come down significantly, you can reduce your cost of operations for investigations and alert management. And they're all doing some of those kinds of things. They're recognizing the need to share data across the enterprise. So some of them are co-locating global operations, actually, co-locating in centers of excellence, in restricted sites around the world, not just every country's head office. So in that way, and they're co-locating the data scientists, the modelers, the people who maintain the systems, and the investigators, so that the hallway traffic in terms of data solutions, pattern detection, better ways to do things is actually quite enhanced. The other thing that they're doing is building large data repositories right now. Some of them call them data lakes. Other ones call them just data farms or data whatever. I haven't heard data mart on that very much. But they're actually taking not transactions, but the alert streams, the analytics on the analytics themselves, in other words, how effective is a scoring engine, and putting that into a place where people can in a non-production environment, actually play with some of the data and start learning something from it. And it's actually a supporter to that cognitive process. The humans are involved with the machine learning itself and helping the machine to learn from itself in that cognitive process. And those are some of the things that are differentiating these institutions these days.
Great. Thank you, Wilson. Glad you made it back to that one. Thank you. All right. We've got,
sorry about the drop-off.
Oh, yeah. No problem. We're close to the top of the hour, but I think we've got time for one more question here. So let me throw this back out to both gentlemen. Deployment in legacy systems is prohibitively expensive. Do you think an interim step of using cognitive computing to develop targeting, using it to translate into rules such as random and refreshing system often gets the 80-20 full cognitive system value?
Yeah, I'll start with that one, and I'm sure, David, you have part of that as well. We all know that legacy systems start to outlive their lives, and the cost of maintenance gets higher with age. And a lot of us have that same problem ourselves. But one of the tactics that's being employed, newer tactics that's being employed today, is a secondary scoring level. In other words, continue to use the legacy systems because they, again, as somebody pointed out in the question, they are difficult to replace. So if you can keep a legacy system and implement an intelligent scoring engine that actually ingests results from several scoring engines and on several types of vectors such as cybersecurity, cyber threat, malware detection, transaction monitoring, both for an AML pattern and for a fraud pattern, if you can actually ingest that into a secondary scoring engine downstream, again, very rapidly, close to real time, then that has actually helped some institutions to actually enhance their capabilities without a huge investment yet. It eventually has to happen in those legacy systems. And I hope that answered that question. David, if you have anything to add, whatever.
No, the only thing I would add is that we are actually working with a number of institutions where people have made significant investments in their existing infrastructures. And so they don't want to necessarily rip and replace. And so one of the characteristics of these is that often you can put this in and have it operating in parallel or in series with your existing detection systems, and it puts the owner of the fraud world in charge of determining when they switch over or if they switch over or if they continue to run in parallel, because they get to see the exact nature of the results and relative costs of the moving from the old to the new. And so we're having a lot of that kind of experience where, just as you have suggested in your question, looking for ways to allow a transition phase in order to, again, optimize the value for the bank.
Excellent. Thank you. And we are just a couple minutes past the top of the hour, so I think probably we'll need to leave it at that. I would like to, first of all, thank Wilson and David very much. It's been a great hour of content and questions. It's always a great sign when we get lots of questions from the audience. Shows how engaged everyone is in the topic at hand. So, and thank you everyone in the audience for being here and asking those questions. Of course, please keep an eye out. We're going to be sending you an email in the next 24 to 48 hours with a link to the recording of this event and to the slides themselves. So you can peruse those, in the future at your leisure, and we encourage you to do that. So keep an eye out for that email. And with that, let me wrap things up. Wish everyone a wonderful rest of the day, and I hope you'll join us again here very soon. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you.